Evening, guys. I am your host, Chi-Town Zone. Without further ado, let's get into this, guys. Man, I don't even know where to begin. It's quite ridiculous to say the least. As I think we are already on day 5 or 6 of the impeachment inquiry hearing, as earlier this morning into this afternoon wrapped up another day of the impeachment hearing once again. As we know, the radical leftist socialist Democrat Party once again pushed to try to get President Trump impeached. With a little less than a year away until the 2020 elections, it just goes to show, as I've said before, you know, just how desperate the Democrat Party truly are. As others have said, they absolutely do not. I think it was McCarthy, as if I'm not mistaken, who just said they do not trust the American people. And it's really unfortunate that, with little less than a year away, once again, the Democrat Party is pushing to impeach President Trump. You know, Now Nancy Pelosi herself can sit there and say that, yes, this is not, a means of impeachment now, but we already know what's going to happen by the time this is all said and done. We see the desperation of the Democrat Party, as they are absolutely desperate, as I've said before, to get President Trump impeached. Especially after the whole Russia thing backfired in their faces. And how many of you remember that it was the leftist media, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, the old usual, pushing this whole farce against President Trump, that there was Russia collusion. And then, of course, again, many of you remember, it was old lying Shifty Shift, once again, who claim, as I've said before, many times again, even though I sound like a broken record, who have said to have had substantial evidence proving Russia collusion, yet couldn't produce a single ounce of it. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up, guys. This guy is one of the biggest liars there is to date. And, it's no secret anymore. Keep in mind, this is the same guy who says he does not know the identity of the whistleblower. But, give me a minute here. We're going to get into that in just a second. But as I've said again, we know full well that this is nothing more than a farce. President Trump called it exactly for what it is, as it was then when it came to Russia. It's a witch hunt. And it's just completely unfair that the Democrat Party is doing all that they can to get President Trump impeached based on nothing more than hearsay, opinion, and presumption, as many of you already know. Adam Shifty Shifts, number one star key witness, ambassador to Ukraine, Mr. Bill Taylor, who was set to testify. He was the first one to testify, and his entire testimony, was based on nothing more than hearsay. And keep in mind, it was his honest opinion that President Trump is guilty of quid pro quo based on nothing more than opinion. For those of you, once again, are wondering what is quid pro quo, I already spoke about it in one of my videos previously. It's a Latin word for something for something. You do something for me in exchange for something in return, which many of you already know. Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, is clearly guilty of, and it's obvious he admitted it on video. But the Democrat Party doesn't seem to think that he did anything wrong. Neither does Joe Biden himself. But I digress. The Democrat Party, we already know just how sneaky the Democrat Party is. And as I've said again, everybody deserves to face their accuser, but tell that to the Democrat Party, as they refuse to let, Hunter Biden testify. They refuse to let the Republican Party cross-examine the whistleblower. They refuse to allow due process, as many of you already know as well. But, that's besides the point as well. And again, like I've said before, this whole thing is nothing more than a farce. It's a witch hunt, as President Trump went on to state. But again, we saw as well as Lieutenant Colonel, Mr. Vidman as well, who went on to state that it was in his opinion that President Trump didn't do anything wrong, according to the transcript as well. Even though it's Adam Lang Shifty Shift that once again refuses to release the transcript, and he added, as I've said before, his own little parody, and many of you heard it again as well, where he tried to, put words into President Trump's mouth that President Trump never said. But again, we already know as well as, anyone else does, this is exactly why, Adam Schiff refuses to release the transcript, because he knows as well as anyone else does with a brain, that President Trump never said any of the things that Adam Schiff tried to claim he did. But it just doesn't seem to matter to anybody on the far left. You know what I'm saying? But of course, Obama clearly sees what's going on as well. That's why he urges the Democrat Party not to lean, or in other words, be careful not to lean too far left. And if you listen carefully again, he says, be careful, as many of you may already remember, be careful not to lean too far left. In other words, you can have these radical leftist, socialist, ideological agendas and beliefs, and you could push them on the people, but be careful. Do not lean too far left. In other words, it was Will Johnson the other day. He had The Mind of Jamal. The Mind of Jamal is another great guy I follow via YouTube. That's the name of his YouTube channel, Mind of Jamal. And he had two other guests, Jamie and another guy. I do apologize. I can't remember his name right off the bat in my head. But, Jamal said something really important, that really struck me about, what former President Obama had to say about that. And, he went on to state that, when Obama said not to lean too far left, is that, the Democrat Party needs to kind of be, a little more secretive of this whole radical leftist socialist agenda that they're pushing. And in my honest opinion, what I think he meant by that is, how many of you remember, and it was no secret, to be quite honest, but, Obama made it obviously clear in a book he wrote when, should I quote, unquote, this is Obama's words, so don't shoot the messenger. When Obama wrote in a book where he said that if the political hands should change shifts, he will back the Muslims. This is not my words, so again, as I've said, do not shoot the messenger. This is Obama's exact words in a book he wrote. He never said this offhand to anybody in person. Like I said, keep it secret. He wrote it in a book about how he felt about the Muslims, and we already know. He refused to call Al-Qaeda for what they were, a terrorist organization, just like ISIS. He wouldn't, properly call them ISIS. I can't think of the word off the bat, but if many of you look into it, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But, we already know, what's going on behind the far left Democrat Party. This is, in my honest opinion, a deep state leftist agenda. How many of you remember, it wasn't long ago, it was a former CIA director, John McLaughlin, who went on to state, and I quote, "Thank God for the deep state." And it's really unfortunate, in my opinion, that, many others have already went on to state, you guys, that the Democrat Party are no longer hiding it. It's obvious what they are trying to do. They want to turn us, as I've said again, into a third world, communist, socialist country. They do nothing but promise you guys free handouts and higher taxes on the working class and the wealthy. And, and what have they done for people of, the African American community, the minority community, and the Latino community, and so on? Absolutely nothing, as others have said. These past 3 years, 3 years. They have been doing nothing but attempting to get President Trump impeached. And it's really not fair, as others have gone on to state. But, it's obvious. Others are on to what the Democrat Party are trying to do. They just want President Trump out of office. And as I've stated before, it's not just President Trump. They just don't want a Republican in office because it doesn't fit their narrative. Just look into Hillary. Look into the whole narrative that they're pushing, this ideological leftist socialist agenda that they want. Higher taxes. They want to tear down the border wall. Just let hundreds, if not thousands, of illegal immigrants just flood right into this country. And hey, with the promise of we'll take care of you. We'll give you free schooling. We'll give you free health care. We'll give you free this and free that. No worries at all. Right? Wrong. As I've stated again, socialist Bernie Sanders does not hide it. He stated many times that yes, taxes will go up on the American people substantially, but in the end, it will pay for itself. Right? Wrong. In my honest opinion, this is so wrong, and you cannot make this stuff up, you guys. But it just goes to show. But, of course, I will be leaving a link in the description box below where I think it was, excuse me just 1 second here, you guys. I think it was a former NSC of National Security went on to state, former National Security Advisor Michael Anton suggested Wednesday that the impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump looks like an inside job. That is exactly what it is. You cannot make this stuff up. We know full well that it is an inside job. How many of you remember it was just recently where the Democrat Party was holding a secret meeting down in the basement in their secret bunker or the chambers or whatever, and none of them bothered to inform members of the Republican Senate. Members of the Republican Senate, Jim Jordan, Senator Collins, you name it, had to storm the chamber doors to be able to get in to become a part of this secret little meeting they were having. Who knows what, the Democrat Party are pushing. And then, of course, as I've stated before, none other than lying Adam Shifty claims he doesn't know the identity of the whistleblower, even though we already know that's a lie, because what was it? It was just the other day when Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's testimony, when members of the Republican Senate attempted to ask him certain questions, of course, old Shifty kept interrupting the questions and claiming that out of fear, of Mr. Vindman's testimony, the whistleblower's identity would possibly be revealed. And of course, keep in mind, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, nor does Adam Shifty, as he claims, do not know the identity of the whistleblower, as many of you may already know. But as I think it was either Nunez or Jordan or one of them went on to state, if you do not know the identity of the whistleblower, what do you have to be afraid of? Why are you afraid to let Lieutenant Colonel Vindman speak up? But, of course, we already know what's going on behind the scenes. Again, this is all a farce. What's-his-face went on to state just a second ago, it's beginning to look like an inside job. It's like a mob boss's attorney trying to convince the jury that Joe Schmo magically tied his own hands behind his back, shot himself twice in the head, and mysteriously launched himself outside the window. And the jury's going, you know what? Hey, Your Honor, we have no reason to believe that, he's guilty of anything. It's all an inside job, right? They're just falsely accusing this guy, and none of it's true whatsoever. So, you do your homework, guys. This is absolutely no fair, as I've stated. And it's an inside job. It's a farce. It's it's not quid pro quo. It's a witch hunt, as President Trump went on to state. But of course, to give me just 1 quick second here, you guys. All right, you guys, I do apologize about that. But again, we are back, and as I was simply stating before, as President Trump went on to just recently state again, this is nothing more than a witch hunt. As I've stated again with the whole Russia probe, the whole Russia collusion thing, and we've seen once again how that completely backfired in their faces, just like the first impeachment inquiry hearing backfired in their faces with Ukrainian ambassador Bill Taylor. With this whole opinion hearsay based testimony. And what happened after that? Especially after the second impeachment inquiry hearing the following day, Democrats changed this whole quid pro quo nonsense to what was it, extortion, and then somehow magically all within 1 week it went from extortion to now bribery, which, as I've stated before, none other than former Vice President Joe Biden is clearly guilty of when it comes to quid pro quo or it comes to bribery. And what's crazy about it, as I've stated again, he admitted this on video. But again, you guys, we already know that this is nothing more than corruption at its finest. This is mob style like corruption. This is like the mafia putting out hits on, innocent victims and, their lawyers trying to convince the jury otherwise, as I've stated again. You cannot make this stuff up, you guys. But again, as I've stated before, we will be leaving a link in the description box below where you can read for this yourself. And before we go any further, I do apologize, if this video goes longer than it normally does. But, this is something I really felt that I need to get off my chest, and I need to share with many of you again, because I'm sure many of you have already caught on to what's going on. This is corruption. This is deep state operative, attempts, to try to get President Trump out of office. That's exactly what this is. But, of course, the article goes on to further read House Intelligence Committee Adam Schiff interrupted Lieutenant Alexander Vindman's testimony during an impeachment hearing Tuesday and cited an effort to protect the whistleblower, as I've stated again. It looks like an inside job, a bunch of career bureaucrats getting together and saying, we have wanted to impeach this guy for 3 years exactly. Let me see before I get off track here again. I do apologize here. And, keep in mind, it was just yesterday. It was Adam Schiff, during yesterday's closing speech, during yesterday's impeachment inquiry hearing, where he went on to state, during the first half of it anyways, that, the Democrats do not take this, lightly, that this is a really difficult thing for them to do. And he himself is even contemplated for an entire year wanting to, impeach President Trump. But we know that is nothing short of a complete lie, because for the past 3 years, they have been doing all that they possibly can to get President Trump impeached. It was just recently, beforehand, it was Nancy Pelosi who went on to state that, this makes the Democrat Party sad that they have to do this. We know that is nothing short of a complete lie, you guys. And that's all the Democrat Party is well known for, is lying. Again, but, I digress, guys. Where, what's his name, went on to state, excuse me, again, I do apologize about that. Let me just get back on track here, you guys. It went on to state here, it looks like an inside job, a bunch of career bureaucrats getting together and saying, we wanted to impeach this guy for 3 years, and how do we do it? Exactly is the real question. The Democrat Party have been looking for all that they possibly can to get President Trump impeached. But the article goes on to further read here. I think we have found a way. Anton went on to state, former National Security Council of the NSC spokesman said to WMAL's Morning on the Mall co-host Vince, of course I will not even attempt to pronounce his last name, and Mary Walter Wednesday, here's the issue. It just looks phony, and that's what they're trying to avoid coming out, he added. But of course, that is exactly what it is. Why do you think the the ratings of viewership are down so bad. And even, members of the Democrat Party have admitted this, because the American people are not stupid. We have caught on to this entire sham by the Democrat Party and what they're trying to do. And you expect us to believe guys like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi that they really don't want to do this? How come? They have been doing all that they can for the past 3 years, as I've said again, to try to get President Trump impeached. It's a deep state operative. We know who the main players are behind this entire scenario. It's Hillary Clinton, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, AOC, to say the least, another socialist, climate change nutcase, who went on to state, and I may be paraphrasing here a little bit, that if we have to prevent President Trump from winning 2020 for the sake of climate change. I mean, as I've said again, you cannot make this stuff up, you guys. But, it just goes to show, as I've said again, just how desperate the Democrat Party are. And it wasn't long, it was a while back recently where AOC actually had the nerve to attack Nancy Pelosi, because Nancy isn't on board with some of AOC's views about certain things, even calling Nancy Pelosi a racist. And, that's all the Democrat Party, the socialist, radical, leftist Democrat Party know how to do. Especially ever since Obama's been out of office. If you don't agree with, their radical leftist agenda, you're racist. You're a bigot, you're a xenophobe, a homophobe, an Islamophobe, and whatever phobe or ism in the book, as I've stated before again. But it just goes to show the ridiculousness of the whole thing. As I've said again, we know who's behind this entire thing. It's a deep state operative to try to get President Trump out of office, and it's not working. They are terrified because President Trump promised, he ran on the promise, during the 2016 election that he was going to drain the swamp. And many of those on the far left, they're terrified. Look what's going on now, with this whole push to get him out of office. And, I'll give you a perfect example, when it comes to the deep state. Of course, many of you remember Jeffrey Epstein, who was arrested a while back based on, this whole child pornography issue thing with him apparently molesting numerous underage girls at the time. And of course, look what happened. The first, he was accused of, many went on to state that Jeffrey Epstein attempted to kill himself. He had to go to the hospital and everything. Every one of you remember that. And then, of course, he was taken back to this high max security prison. It was a federal prison where he was taken. And then, of course, his first night back after his first attempt to supposedly kill himself, the two guards that were supposed to be watching over him supposedly took a 3-hour nap, and the camera, keep in mind there was a camera that was watching over his cell to keep an eye on him, supposedly malfunctioned prior to his death. Now keep in mind, you guys, the family ordered a private doctor to perform an autopsy on Jeffrey Epstein, and the reports later indicated that Jeffrey Epstein's death was perfectly consistent with that of a homicide, as though someone had strangled him. But again, you tell that to the Democrat Party. We know, as I've said again, that this is a deep state operative. Look at George Soros, look at many of those on the far left. Again, as I've stated before, that's a perfect opportunity, as I've stated, when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. Many of you may sit there and say, oh man, Chi-Town, you done fell off the bandwagon, man. Don't tell me you're turning into one of those conspiracy theorists. Just do your research yourself, and you will see what's really going on when it comes to the far left, this deep operative that they're pushing again. But, you cannot make this stuff up. But in the end, we can only see what's going to happen by the time this is all said and done when it comes to this impeachment inquiry hearing. Nancy Pelosi went on to state that this is not a hearing for impeachment, but we already know exactly what it is, because by the time it's all said and done, they're going to attempt once again to try to get President Trump impeached. And we already know that without any shadow of a doubt, that the Democrat Party have already handed President Trump 2020. As I've stated before, could this entire thing backfire on the Democrat Party? Without any shadow of a doubt, my honest opinion, it will. And, keep in mind, this is only opinion, so do not shoot the messenger, guys. Take it with a grain of salt if you like. But again, this is my honest opinion on the entire matter. But as I've stated again, and others have said on, this is a complete circus. Nunez calls it exactly what it is. It's a complete circus. McCarthy went on to state just recently that it's a complete disgrace that this is happening and it needs to stop, including President Trump, where he stated yesterday that this is a disgrace. Where he, before he went out to fly, or he flew out to host another rally, again, he read a little bit of the transcript of what, between him and Vladimir Zelensky's conversation. And again, I think it was, he urged Ukraine to do the right thing. He was asking for nothing in return. And he even urged them to do the right thing. But of course, as I've said again, tell that to shift, in which he still insists as of yesterday that President Trump is guilty of quid pro quo. And as I've said again from the first hand, it changed from quid pro quo to a bribery and so on. And you cannot make this stuff up, you guys. But of course, we will continue to do our very best to monitor this, you guys. But with that being said, everyone, again, I will be leaving a link in the description box below where you can read further into this yourself. And again, please do feel free to leave your opinion down in the comment section below. And be sure to subscribe for further updates or any breaking news. And be sure to hit that little bell so whenever a video is uploaded, you will be notified. But again, friends, with that being said, please do continue to pray for President Trump, his family, his administration, and let's be sure to pray for this country. And with that being said, guys, do stay tuned and God bless.